Hello once again. I'm Charlie Monroe. I'm the youth pastor at River's Edge. Welcome back to Word on a Wednesday. I have a brief couple-minute idea for you. When I was 18 and graduated, I think, I had a lot of friends, fortunately, at the time that were pastors, and I asked them for a lot of advice on kind of with some pointers or some words of wisdom that you have for kind of the next stage of life I was entering into. I was going to college after graduating high school, and one of the pastor friends of mine sat me down, and he didn't give me this long spiel. He just kind of had one succinct idea that I kind of wanted to share with you today. In Genesis 11, towards the end of it, after the story of the Tower of Babel, there's this brief preface history to the story of Abraham in Genesis that starts in chapter 12, but it talks about Abraham's father. And I have it right here. His father's name was Terah. And there's really only a very brief, maybe paragraph or two devoted to the idea of Terah. And it says that it talks about the children that he had, and who the children married, and all these kind of random details. And then it just has this little brief section where it says that one day Terah took his family and his grandsons and moved from Ur of the Chaldeans and then headed for the land of Canaan. But they stopped at Haran and settled there. And then it ends by saying Terah lived for 205 years and then he died while he was still in Haran. And Abraham's story picks up in the next chapter, and it talks about him moving his family and all of his constituents to Canaan, which is where his father Terah was originally heading. Now, whether Terah was called by God specifically to go there or not, it does not explicitly say. There's a lot of people that would argue that's the connotation. And it's interesting because if you look on the map of what we know of the ancient world, it was not Haran where he settled, was not on the way to Canaan. It was kind of, up and above and kind of out of the way of any traveling that direction, which is just interesting, to say the least. But my pastor friend of mine, going back to the beginning of the story, he said, pretty much gave me the kind of one-liner, don't settle, which is a very abstract and very ambiguous statement, but one that really gripped me. I would say that this story has kind of become like a life verse or life story for me, the concept of not settling. And for me, at the time, I think I thought that was somehow not necessarily a super unique idea, but not an idea that many people shared. But then you kind of grow older and talk to more people, you realize no one wants to settle. At least no one plans on settling. Interesting problem in life is not that people settle, it's the people that don't realize when they are settling. We don't realize when we have stopped along the way at times. And perhaps for some times in some sections of our life, we knew we had to stop along the way to something for many reasons, that a lot of things interrupt life. But I think settling, and I'm talking about settling with goals and visions and dreams and what we've called to do, can happen very subtly. It can happen through the slow wear and care of life. It can happen through just the people and influences that we have. It can happen because the community that influences us changes. It can happen for a lot of things, financial problems as well. I mean, you can name it. There's probably 1,000 different things that could help, that could help us settle. And so the question that I had today is, one, what do I feel that God has called me to? What have I been distinctly stirred up for, lack of a better analogy. One of the ways that people have said in the past that you can really discover what that is kind of lean into what breaks your heart, what has captivated you, what has made you upset in the past, but also what makes you afraid, because oftentimes what we're afraid of is directly correlated to something that God wants to do in our life. So that'd be my first question. And the second question would just be the self-examination of maybe we know what that is, but maybe we have kind of lost track and we have settled along the way. We have lost focus, or we have just simply found what seems to be a good thing. Where Terah settled was a city, a place of comfort, a place of refuge, a place of safety. And Canaan kind of represented at least more to this story, and maybe practically just more of a wilderness sort of experience, a little more of the unknown. And so it's easy to see the analogy, it's easy to pull out kind of the thought process that could apply to our own lives. Practically for me, when I felt the call to ministry, one of the clear ideas that I felt from God at that time was to pursue some sort of counseling professionally. And I was 17 at the time. And I went through school, got my undergrad, and it wasn't until about 4 years after I graduated that I kind of refelt that sense of, you really need to come back and revisit this idea. And so that's what's been cool for me is in 4 months, I graduate with my master's in counseling and I'll be a licensed therapist. And this is kind of, for me, this next step of like, all right, now God, what do you want to do with this? I also want to throw out there, very much planning to stay around and planning to do whatever I do with that in conjunction with what I'm doing here, just so there's no questions there. But it definitely is exciting to think this has been a long 13-year call that is coming to its end for me. And what does God have next? And what is God doing in that way in your life? So that's my word on a Wednesday for you. Love to hear what God is speaking to you. Thank you.